Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Master the NEC, where we talk about the National Electrical Code and all things electrically related. On today's episode, I'm going to be doing a request. Now, everybody knows for many years, I was an electrical inspector, electrical supervisor, electrical engineer for the city of Richmond, Virginia, as well as a code supervisor for the city of Alexandria, Virginia. And I had numerous electrical inspectors underneath me, as well as getting my hands out there doing electrical inspections and educating and teaching and all those type of things. When you're, overseeing a bunch of guys and gals, and you have to be very hands-on in making sure that everybody's on the same page, right? There's nothing worse than having an inspection department that is all over the place. Right. You want to have inspectors that are basically following the same lines that everybody would have as far as all the inspectors there, so that you're not making somebody do something that's different than what the other inspector's making. And you want to make sure always that when an inspector inspects something, that's not an expector, it's an inspector. And what we're trying to do is look and see what is it compliant to the minimum standard, which is the National Electrical Code. They can go over and above that. They can do whatever they want. I don't really care. As an inspector, you should not care. I'm not going to put my wants and desires on these individuals. Again, I'm there to do my inspection based on the minimum standard or any amendments that might be through my jurisdiction or what have you. So anyway, I got a real interesting email and we were going to do this one Electrician Live episode, but at the end of the day, it's really asking me about inspections. And I know Jay, who's my co-host over on Electrician Live, check that out. It's on Thursday nights now at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Really doesn't do inspections or hadn't done inspections before, so it's kind of the questions kind of generated really to me. And the gentleman is going to become an electrical inspector, kind of working towards that way, becoming an electrical inspector. And I should say that depending on where you're at in the country, you might have requirements to be an electrician already, whether you're a master or journeyman, but not everywhere. Some states don't have a prerequisite for being even in the electrical field at all. But once you come on board, usually they'll put you through a training program. Like in Virginia, where I started out, we had to go through Department of Housing and Community Development, and you had to first to get hired, though, for the city of Richmond. You had to get hired, you had to be a master electrician to be an inspector. Okay, and that was a prerequisite that was set by the jurisdiction, not statewide. So there could have been other states, for example, that would hire you if you were a floor sander and you wanted to become an electrical inspector. Okay, there you go. Texas is a great example. There's no licensing requirements in the state of Texas for electrical inspectors, even though IAEI is right here in Richardson, Texas, which is the International Association of Electrical Inspectors. They carry no weight when it comes to inspection authority. So the jurisdictions would have to determine what they require. Of course, out in rural counties, you don't have any jurisdiction, okay, other than what the county may have, and they may or may not have inspections. So it's very loose across the country. So I'll talk about my experiences, being that I've been in Texas now for quite a few years, and growing up and being a head of jurisdictions in Virginia, and kind of answer some of the questions that the gentleman has. So hopefully you'll get something out of it. Now, he says he had a first interview and nailed it. That's awesome. Going into his second interview, and there's a little tip that I always tell people. When you think about, code being the code is the code. We're not there as inspectors to reinvent the wheel. We're not there, or you shouldn't be there, to impose your personal will on anything. At the end of the day, we just have a job. And our job as an inspector is to go in, understand the code well enough to make sure it's in compliance with a minimum safety standard. And if somebody does go over and above that, that's fine, as long as they don't go so far above it that they actually come 360 and end up creating a violation. That wouldn't be good. So we have to kind of look at all those things when we're in the process of doing an electrical inspection. But the other thing that I tell people all the time is, as an electrical inspector, me personally, or even the guys and gals that worked under me, you cannot fail somebody if you cannot cite code. Now, I know you're saying, no, I can fail them. Physically, yes, you can. But morally, should you? If you can't cite a code reference, if you can't find it in an NEC, how can you fail an individual? I have a hard time swallowing that because the code is in black and white. It's in the document, NFPA 70. It's right here. If you're an inspector and you can find a violation, then cite it and cite the code reference. That way, the customer, which is the electrician, and they are the customer of the jurisdiction, demands that they have clarity. And that means you need to show me what I failed about and what code section did I fail or what installation. And not just from your gut, not just I assume, but you have to prove it. You have to document it. I have no reason to trust you just because you tell me something. Hell, people say things about code or code this, code that all the time. Don't believe any of it until you put your eyes on it or somebody give you a code reference and you can look it up. You don't take their word for that. Okay. Now, a couple of the questions that it was asked, and it does state that I really don't talk a whole lot about that part of my past. I don't know why. I mean, I just don't. I also served a role as the electrical plans examiner as well, and did inspections, all those type of things. Different. If you ever watch that episode, if you ever watch the show Office, right, with Steve Carell and all them on there, Dwight and all that. Undoubtedly, any office you're going to look at and go, absolutely, that I am living in an episode of The Office. There's somebody that you can identify with in your office with that show, right? And so it's the same thing. You have so many different personalities. There's always that one person there that knows it all, even though they don't. There's that one guy that's a code guy who knows a lot, but is very quiet, doesn't want to get controversial, doesn't want to get into anything. The moment that he speaks up, the guy that wants to take control barks at him, and then that person gets quiet. Oh gosh, there's inspectors that just want to get through the day and go home. They really don't care. There's some that probably should have retired a long time ago. There's all different things that you'll encounter. One thing I do tell people that come from the electrical industry as an electrician that becomes an inspector is remember that you're wearing a different hat now. Don't keep referring to this is how I did it or this is how I would have done it because you're not doing it. It's not you. This is not your install. Well, I got failed years ago because of this, so now I am forcing people to have to do that. Absolutely not. That is not the mentality to take. The chip on the shoulder needs to go. You have to remember that you have a responsibility to teach what you know through citing code references to the electricians because, the more that you educate them, if you have the knowledge to educate, the better your inspections will be, the quicker they'll be. And let me be honest with you, as an inspector, I wanted to get in there and get out of there, okay? I had too many on my plate. My guys had too many on their plate. No reason for us to hang around, okay? We're going to get in and get out. So, again, cite code references, and again, at the end of the day, you got to wear a different hat. You're not an electrician anymore. You're an inspector. So a couple questions here. Charity, one of those questions is tips on being a good one. You have said not all inspectors are the same. What makes a good one? Okay, good question. So what makes a good inspector? So a good electrical inspector is somebody who will listen as well as will give their opinions based on code fact, not on fiction, not on what they want to believe. Okay. A good inspector will go into an installation with an open mind and not simply go in there thinking they're going to create this list of violations. Personally, when I did an inspection, I was hoping I found nothing because I wanted to be in and I wanted to be out of there. But as you get good, the things will just kind of blare out at you. You'll be able to tell. You'll be able to see things. You'll be able to even look at a box and know whether box fill is an issue or anything like that. The other thing that I tell to be a good inspector is that you cannot come to the point where you're swayable. In other words, if you do enough inspections for individuals, you can't let somebody go one day and then the next day not. I mean, you need to be consistent. And so I tell people all the time, the National Electrical Code is black and white as far as the text. If there's something in the code, for example, that says point blank, and it does, okay, it does, 210.52a, if it says, if I have to have a receptacle within 6 feet of an opening, like a doorway, and then I can go up to 12 feet, so no point along the wall line is more than 6 feet from a receptacle, then I'm not going to put a receptacle that's more than 6 feet apart from the doorway. I am going to make sure that my receptacles are not more than 12 feet apart, because perfectly in the middle, I'm within 6 feet of each receptacle. Now, in reality, they're probably going to not be that far apart because of room aesthetics and the way you put the receptacles. I'm just using this as a point. You have to be consistent. I don't want to give somebody 1 inch one day, turn around the next time, I got a chip on my shoulder and I'm taking it away. Remember, code is a minimum standard. Now, for things that are black and white, I don't give any breaks, and I never gave a break. If it's black and white. Now, if it becomes gray and they have a good argument, a good position for why they didn't do something, and I can look in the code and realize that I'm not going to get in trouble as an inspector for allowing something that is adverse to what's in the National Electrical Code. You look at yourself. If it can pass the smell test, the Littman test, the fact that I can read this and anybody plausibly would read that to say, you know what, this could go either way. I'm going to make that call, and I'm going to let me as the jurisdiction or the representative for the jurisdiction make this call and let you do something. If it's written in the code and it's clear, then my advice to an inspector is to follow the code. That way you can be consistent. So I tell people all the time, if you don't tell lies, you don't have to remember the lies. So just say it what it is, and you don't have to worry about it, right? So one of my tips for being a good inspector is always cite your code references, follow the code black and white. If there's a position that's developed, and it's a plausible decision that's not black and white in the code, then whenever you can, if you come to the same agreement, then allow the electrician to do what they're doing, but make sure you're foundationally protected in a sense that you're not allowing. A great example is if it says AFCI devices are required for a circuit and you decide to let them not put AFCIs on it, that's a problem, because the AFCI would be required per the NFPA 70 standard. You're allowing it not to be, unless you have some kind of modification from your jurisdiction, some amendment that's published through your state or jurisdiction. You best follow the NEC, okay? That's my advice. To be a good inspector, follow those lines and do your job diligently. And again, don't impart your personal beliefs on something other than what's written in the NEC. And if something's not in the NEC and you want to bring your personal opinion in it, equally allow the other person's opinion, knowing that ultimately you're the one's going to make the decision. But look, we're not here to make things overly difficult on people. If you're one of those type of inspectors, you'll never be a good inspector. Okay, you're not there to make it overly difficult. You're there to give them a path. Okay. So anyway, there you go. That's my tip. I guess it's a tip or not. I'm not sure. But again, anytime I failed somebody or my guys failed, they would have to give them code references. Whether the state required it or not, some states, they don't have to, and then you got to ask them, and then if you ask them, they'll give it. That wasn't the case in my state. A good inspector will always give code references for everything they turn down. Okay. And they don't need to say some kind of smart remark. I've heard this said before. It says, the inspector says, I don't have to give you need to learn the code better. Oh, that's probably one of the biggest BS statements I've ever seen. If that comes out of inspector's mouth, shit, you would have knocked the spit out of it. And I tell you right now, that wouldn't work for me or my inspectors. That ain't going to work. Anyway, sorry about that. All right, so the next one, it says, how was it going from climbing a ladder and pulling cable to driving around looking at jobs? Well, I guess I don't know how to answer that one. I guess as an electrical inspector, it's just you're going out from job to job and you're looking at the jobs, but you're almost like you're getting into your electrician mode. I mean, when you're walking on the project and you're looking for things, and your knowledge of the National Electrical Code has to be of the level that, and it's going to be tough when you start out. Whether you're electricians don't really look for violations. I mean, they're trying to do an install and not have violations, but their job is not to go around and find violations in other people's work. So trust me, it becomes way difficult when you start critiquing other people's projects. Okay. In fact, so much so that you end up focusing on the minutia, the really small little things, and you miss the big picture, like an improper case to neutral, okay, or something in a remote distribution panel. So don't put the blinders on. I mean, it's going to be tough because the little stuff is going to stick out, but it's the big stuff that's going to nab you, okay, because you're just not used to seeing it. Or you might not install something a certain way, so you're just not familiar with it, even though it would be code compliant. So that type of thing. Now, going from inspecting, for me, I did a lot of training as well with inspectors, even while I was an electrical contractor and we had our businesses. I did a lot of the training, continuing ed for the state. And I was the first one in Virginia doing continuing ed. So I was already kind of teaching and installing and walking jobs and trying to, have inspectors come out so we could teach them on certain things. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, I didn't see a big transition for me. But I was always very heavy in NEC anyway. So I was always critiquing job sites and my guys, my brother, and anybody's for code compliance. So for you, it'll be difficult if you pull wire, pull cable, like a cable jockey all the time, and now you're going on projects and you're looking at other people's work. I would tell you the first 10, 15 inspections or more, don't be worried. It might even be more than that. Don't be worried about the time. I know the jurisdictions are going to be heavy on you because you get a number of inspections, a number of tickets that have to be done, but take your time. Now, the electrician's going to be sweating it because he wants to get you in and out. I get it. Time is money and he doesn't want to stay there. COVID's changed that a little bit, but take your time to really look at other people's work and don't so much say, I wouldn't do it this way or I wouldn't have done that. I mean, you can say that, but don't reflect that in how you do your inspection, I guess you should say. But I didn't have a really problem transition for any of that because I was already kind of inspecting things. And so I didn't have a whole problem with that. Let's see here. Was it nice to watch your tools collect dust? And then the next one is talking about office politics. I'll get into the office politics because you're going to have it. The dust, I still always kept up. Now, in your jurisdiction, you couldn't do electrical work. That would be a violation in your jurisdiction to do that. You couldn't inspect your own work and things like that. So with me, it was a little different because I was in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And when I decided to take the job in Richmond, Virginia, I commuted and I stayed in an apartment during the week up in Richmond while my family still was back in Harrisonburg, Virginia. So I would commute. I would go on Sunday night, head back to Richmond and stay there, wake up, work. And then on Friday evening, after my final inspection, I would haul tail back to be with my family on the weekends. Did that for quite a few years. And then when I transitioned up to the city of Alexandria as a head of their codes and standards, ahead of their code enforcement and code inspections division as code supervisor, same thing. I just got an apartment up there. And again, when Friday came, I hit home. So there was quite a few years, especially when my kid was young, that I was not home during the week. I was gone on weekends and during the week I stayed in an apartment. Obviously the money that you get for inspecting or even supervising, to be honest with you, municipal money is not that great. Let me put it that way. But it is solid. I'll talk about those things in a little bit. But, having to pay a mortgage and also having to pay an apartment didn't leave a lot of discretionary spending. So I ate in a lot, didn't go out a lot, didn't do a lot of things until I got into the supervisory role, in the engineering role at the city. Then I used to take my team, all my inspectors and stuff out to dinner all the time. And that got expensive because I used to like to go to Hooters, definitely for the wings. And they would bring family and I would always pick up the tab. And I mean, we're talking, it got quite expensive because I like to get my folks together at least once a week or once every other week. So picking up that tab, no, I did not write that off. We didn't have expenses for inspectors or even supervisors. So I was paying that because I wanted to keep, all my team on the same page and keep everybody's morale up because it is sometimes tough in a municipal environment to keep morale up. So that's just what I did. Love to have that money back, but it ain't coming back. So when it comes to, the dust of the tools, my tools really didn't ever lose any dust because I was always doing side projects in other counties or even back in Virginia on weekends and things like that. So I never really let them gather dust, but some people might have, trouble with that. Okay. I liked working with the tools and I still do. It just so happens to me that I have a talent for teaching the code and an understanding of the National Electrical Code. So, it's like many things in this industry. You have so many opportunities in the electrical industry to do all kinds of things. I'm more code driven. I created Electrical Code Academy and moved in that direction. I still work for Encore Wire as the head of their codes and standards. And so I still stay very active and teach, but I almost vicariously put on the tools through students all the time because I get tons and tons and tons of emails and pictures and installation questions. And Paul, help me in this installation. What can I do here? How do I size this? So there's a physical part and then there's the mental part. The mental part is the installation and thinking about the installation, routing the cables and running the conductors and bending the raceway. Okay, there's where am I going to bend this? Where would be a good way to go from here to there? That mental part tied with the physical part. The mental part, whether you're doing it or not, it's always there, right? So if you ran a piece of NMB, you ran one, you ran a million. Okay, it's not brain surgery. Understanding the drilling of studs and everything like that and routing and looking at an install and saying, okay, where are my home runs going to go and all that. Yeah, I miss those things from time to time. That's why I still do little projects here and there. But when you make a decision, for example, to go into inspections, you kind of almost have to just leave that all behind unless you're going to do side work outside of your jurisdiction. But I think that I know that quite a few people, the great thing about doing inspections is that you can make a career out of it. And as you get older and you put your time in, it's a great second part of your career to be an inspector. One of those type of things. And that doesn't mean it's always for the older folks. And I hate this saying that I hear from people time to time. It's like, you can't do anymore, therefore you teach. That's about as ignorant as I've ever heard. And there's still people out there that are that stupid to say that. And that is what it is. They're just stupid because that's not the case. There's inspections is a career path that many people have taken. The fact of the matter is that some electricians who get up there who want to actually be inspectors is actually a benefit to the industry as long as they're not bringing the baggage, right? As long as they're not, I would do it this way or that way, or I'm going to fail you because I got failed years ago for that, or I heard from somebody that you can't do that. No, as long as they're not doing that kind of crap, then they bring a wealth of experience. If they come in there saying, oh, it's going to be this way, it's going to be this way, with that kind of that chip on their shoulder, then they're going to suck. And they're never going to be respected. One of those things is many people have said, you can, I don't ever care if you like me as long as you fear me and respect me. I don't know that the fear and respect can go hand in hand because I know plenty of people who would fear you because you're an inspector, because you hold the pass or fail in your hand, but I don't necessarily think they respect you. Now, you can have both. You can have that fear that, oh, so-and-so's coming and he knows his stuff or she knows their stuff, but they still highly respect you because of how you carry yourself. If you do an inspection and you leave that inspection and you fail somebody, but you give them the reason why you failed them, you maybe give them a little bit of an education while they're there. You have an open mind to what they have to say. Who knows? You might even learn something, one or two. Everybody's got something to teach. Everybody's got something to give. That's a good inspector. A good inspector can take it, give it and take it, and will cite their references. And that is what the difference is when it comes to something like that. And I'm not sure I stayed actually on topic with that, but anyway, that's what I got. Let's see here. The next question he has. How was it from going from climbing a ladder and pulling cable to driving around looking at jobs? I think I kind of addressed that one. I might have just read that again. Inspectors still climb ladders, at least the ones I know. There's some that say they won't go on ladders and all this kind of stuff, but you know what? It's kind of part of the job. If I've got to get to a rooftop or I've got to look at something, I need to get there. So becoming an inspector is no excuse for not staying active and engaging and doing what you need to do. Again, that's going to, make you stand out amongst others, is that you're a go-getter. I know inspectors who say, I don't do crawl spaces, kind of too old to get down, or I don't want to get down and crawl on. Well, that's part of the job. That's in the job description. That's what you're supposed to do. If you're not, go do something else. Okay. It's part of the job description. Let's see. All right. Office politics. Okay. Topic that comes up quite a bit. Every office has it. Inspections offices are no different. You've got the select group of people that bitch about everything. You got a select group of people that feel like they're underpaid. You got a select group of people that feels like they're underappreciated. You got a select group of people that think they should have got a promotion, and they want to share that with everybody like I give a damn about their situation. Okay? Now, as a supervisor, you do care, and you should be reasons why somebody doesn't get a raise or promotion or whatever. But as an inspector amongst the collection, my advice is to keep your mouth shut and don't grieve your personal business or your dirty laundry to other people, because they can act like they want to hear it, but they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear your crap. They got their own crap to deal with. And problem is, we like to talk about our issues, and so we like to share. Well, in an office environment, on inspection office, it's best not to share. Okay? It's best to go in, get your assignments, and get out and go do your job. The more you share, the more problematic it will be. The only time that office politics can start to rear its head is if you actually show sides. If you actually show that you can, that there is, personally, it's the office gossip and the BS that's involved with it that you should try to steer away as much as you can. Don't try to pick sides. Don't say, Jimmy comes to you and goes, and says something about somebody, and, what do you think? And I'm like, I don't really know. I really thought about it. I don't really have much of an opinion on it. Remember, you work with these people. They're not necessarily your friends. They're your coworkers. Develop friends outside. That's my other big advice. Don't get too friendly with the people you work with. Now, I can say this, and I developed a great relationship and a friendship with an employee, one that worked under me. But, he used to come to all my training anyway, and I knew him outside of the office in that sense, and we developed that kind of relationship. But inside the office, he didn't get treated any different than anybody else. So it wasn't apparent that it was any different. I mean, I treated everybody the same way. So office politics can get nasty. Our recommendation, at least in the short term, if you're new, is don't get into the gossips. Don't give your feelings. Don't give your opinions. Don't criticize management. Don't do any of that. And I'm certainly going to tell you not to do it until you get tenure. Usually when you go to work for a municipality, and everyone's different, I get it, but usually you'll have a certain period of time where you have to get tenure, so you're going to be working probationary period. Don't give them any reason to get rid of you, because I can tell you right now, in the jurisdictions that have policies that have what's called a grievance policy, once you're past your tenure, it is very hard to get removed from the city or the municipality. You have to really screw up. I mean, you really do. Either you're taking bribes for inspections, which I have seen happen, or you are just really, you're supposed to be out in the vehicle doing inspections and you're actually not there. You're going home, or, you got to remember, your vehicle could be tracked at any time. Your cell phone could be tracked at any time. Your laptop could be tracked at any time. As a supervisor, I knew where my guys were at any given time. I could call IT and track and find out where you're at. Customers are going to complain. It's just going to happen. Some inspector, you're going to be out there and you're going to have a customer that just doesn't like the fact that you failed them. They're on a time crunch. They're going to send in a complaint. In most all jurisdictions, when somebody files a complaint, whether legit or not, it has to be investigated. You can't dismiss it. So it's so much easier if you just come in, do your job, smile. And what's that old saying? Kill them with kindness. It's tough. Trust me. When you go and do an inspection and somebody gets really, really ticked off at you, the best thing you can do is fill out an accurate inspection ticket that shows the violations, look at them and smile and say, here you go, have a nice day, and leave. Don't get mouthy with them. Don't try to tit for tat. Don't try to justify your code references. If you put them on paper, that's what it is. Get out of there. When you're in the office and one of the older guys or younger folks is somebody that's a gossip, wants to bring up gossip, my advice to you is to look at them and say, well, I really never thought much about that. I really don't have an opinion one way or another, and just leave. Remember, these aren't your friends. They were there before you got there. They're not the ones that invited you there. Make your friends outside of the office. Now, if you can be cordial with your people in the office, politics, get cordial. But you're going to last so much better if you portray neutralness and just don't want to get into it. And I know it's tough. I know it's tough because at some point you'll get in trouble for something or whatever, and you feel like you got to vent to somebody. I get it. Go home and vent to the wife. Go vent to the other half if you don't have a wife. Whatever. Just my advice is to keep it out of the office. Okay? Just because I know those environments the best you can. And I'd like to say, I wish I could have left some of that stuff. It took me a while to realize some of this stuff. But yeah, office politics, take the high road, take the middle road, say I don't have an opinion on that, and just go home and gripe to somebody else. Don't do it in the office. Because I can tell you, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of public opinion. Also, never put anything in an email through the company, whatever, that you would not say to them in their face. I'm just saying, don't get so mad enough to send an email. If you can't say it to their face, don't put it in an email, because you know people are reading your emails. Okay? If you don't think they are, wake up. They are reading your emails, whether it's IT, HR, whoever. Trust me. If Google is sophisticated enough to know what's on a website and indexing it, trust me, there's municipalities, HRs, and all can look for triggers of different things. Just don't do it. And keep them very short and direct, and keep it on topic. Remember, keep your personal life out of the office. That's the best advice I could give it. And I know it's tough, but that's the best advice I can give you. And you'll start out that way, and then a year into it, you'll start bringing your personal life into it. It happens to everybody. That's just my advice. Next question he had. What is something you can do to be a great inspector? Learn the code. Again, your job is the code at that point. Learn it in and out. Be engulfed in it. Be obsessed with things that you don't know. That's the thing. Pick topics in the code that you struggle with, and then just hammer it out, and don't stop learning that topic until you have a full grasp. If you don't know PV and you really want to know PV and you're doing PV inspections, you need to dig in 690 and ask all the questions you can of anybody that you know. There are tons of well-qualified individuals out there who can answer questions to help your base of knowledge. Okay? Don't be afraid to ask. Again, being a sponge is important when you're an electrical inspector. Always learning. You know, unless you already know it all, then okay. How much office work is involved? Well, everywhere is different. Typically, you had a supervisor who would put together all of the, it's an automated system most of the time. Again, smaller jurisdictions may be less, but once an inspection is called and it goes into the system, then there's a printout. And if on many systems, it's based on area that you're assigned inspector, and it will automatically put it on your list. You'll go in the office. If you go in the office, you'll print it out, and you'll do hand tickets, or you have a computer and they're all in the computer. And you'll download it, or it'll be, when you log in, it'll be sitting there on your system. And then our cars, for example, in Richmond, it was all manual tickets. Everything was manual. Now they've changed now, but it was manual tickets. Everything you write in inspection and leave it on the job site. When I went to Alexandria, Virginia, years later, that was all electronic. Everything. So it automatically assigns the inspections. If it's in your area, it was on your daily log. So you would log into your system and you'd see what you had for the day. It's all automated. You do the inspections and you issue the inspections, whether it's whether you print it out in the car and leave it on site, because we still, even though it was electronic, we still wanted to leave a hard copy. So we had little mobile printers in the car, and we would print the ticket out and leave it on the job site, pass, fail, whatever. But every jurisdiction's a little different. Paperwork, it's just really inspections. Now, you might have some paperwork where you have to do something like special inspections, specialized things where you have to take maybe third-party inspections, and maybe you're the one that's assigned to keep track of all that. So you'll have a folder, you'll keep all that third-party, but everything's pretty much going electronic now with InterGov and all these other systems. It's no more office work than anything else. Again, probably less. I didn't see a whole lot of the office work. Answering emails, answering phones, doing your inspections, depending on how antiquated your system is, maybe keying those in at the end of the day after you've done all your inspections. You might have to key them into the computer so they update in the system. But that's about it. That's about it with the office work part of it. Again, if you're a inspector that does specialized things, then you might have some third-party stuff that you have to verify, and you might have to keep that documentation and things like that. The other paperwork that I can think of is, of course, many states, you have to renew your license as an inspector if they have licensing. And if that's the case, then you have to keep track of your training hours and that type of paperwork so that you can turn it into the state so that you can get your license renewal for inspections. And that's different than your renewal for your master or journeyman electrician if you happen to have that, because this is an inspection-driven thing. Unless your state doesn't have inspections licenses, then that wouldn't be a step for you. But that's the only other paperwork that you have to keep up with, I think, most cases. Next one, did I enjoy doing it? I thoroughly enjoyed the inspection process because I'm an educator. And I can go on a job site and things just seem to jump out at me. So I used to tell other inspectors, this is not a pat on the back, although I'm sure I've got my haters out there that'll say, there's Paul again. When I would walk into a building, I could see the violations. It's almost like one of those virtual 3D. The things just stuck out to me. But I live it. I lived it. Even then, I lived it and breathed it every day. I was always in the code. I was always taking classes. I was always teaching classes. I was always writing things. So it's not fair to say, that type of thing. But I enjoyed the inspection process. I enjoyed interacting with the customers. I enjoyed the electricians, whether they, I remember that there was jobs I went on to where I was called Punta a lot. And it took me a while to realize what they were calling me. And I guess they didn't like me too much. But, I can't help it. If you're bitter because you fail, I can't help that. If you don't like me because of that, I don't care. But then I had my share of guys who just loved to see me come out there, and then some that didn't because I was usually the supervisor or in charge. So if I was making a trip to the site, something was wrong, or an inspector called me, or maybe I was filling in for the other inspectors. But when I started out with the city, I was doing inspections, 20, 30 inspections a day, just like all the other guys. And it's rough. It's constantly on the go, and you're expected to get a certain number of your inspections done. So some days lighter than others, obviously. Some inspections easier than others. You can get 30 inspections if you go to an apartment complex and every apartment's an inspection. And you don't have to leave that site. Man, you can crank up the inspection. You can get 30 inspections done, 35 inspections done a day because they're all right there. But then you could be in an area where the inspections are drawn out all over the city. And that just really inhibits that type of thing. But it was still the freedom to, you're out doing your inspections. If you want to stop for a second at 7-Eleven and grab a drink or, it's a freedom that you should not take advantage of. And there's many people that do. And those are the ones that give it the black eye because, you're trusted. It's freedom, but you have to still get the work done. So, I enjoyed it. Why did you stop? Well, I moved up pretty quickly. So I started as an inspector within a year, and I was asked to come to the jurisdiction specifically. Somebody, one of the building officials had seen that I had was teaching courses all over, and they attended one of my trainings. And when they attended my training, they said, if you're ever interested in becoming an inspector, let us know. And I said, well, I train inspectors, but I've never really thought about doing it. I'm doing too well as a contractor with me and my brother and as my own contracting business. And so what happened is you had a downturn in the economy, approximately about 2006-ish, somewhere like that. And a guy just called out of the blue again and said, you ever thought of doing inspections? And he said, I know you're a little bit more advanced than an inspector, but you got to start out. Everybody starts out there, but within 6 months to a year, I'll have you up into a supervisory role and eventually, our engineer role. I'm like, okay, if that's the plan, then I'll give it a shot. And that's how I got it started. The reason I left is because I left inspections. I moved very quickly into supervisory, but yet I still like to go out and do inspections and be out there, even though I was an active supervisor. I didn't sit in an office. And then I became the head of the plans examiner, so I was constantly doing plan review and meeting with engineers and correcting a lot of the issues on plan submittals. Kind of move these projects along. And then I ended up leaving there and going to the city of Alexandria, Virginia, where I was a head of a code, the code for them. So I was the code supervisor, so I oversaw it. So I was still riding around, checking up on inspectors, going on jobs, filling in here, there, and getting them ready for the day and all that kind of stuff. And then I got an offer from NEMA to be their Southern Regional. The person that was there had passed away, and they had heard about me and and reached out to me and said, we have an opening. There's going to be people that apply, but are you interested? I'm like, okay, I'll do an interview. And I went in and interviewed with them, and it was quite a few people, and they narrowed it down to 3, and I was one of them. And as I went up to do my interview, I went back down to the parking deck, and there was 2 other well-established, well-known in the IAEI circles inspectors who were vying for that position. And before I got down to the parking lot to leave, Mr. Gaddis, who was the CEO of NEMA, president, they contacted me and said, come back up here. He wants to see you. And so I ended up, going back up there, and they offered me the job on the spot. And so I took that position, and it was a dream job. It really was. It was, to be able to travel around the country and teach the code. Now, the reason I left that job is because it got more than that. It started getting into building codes, and every time the storm would come, they wanted us to be somewhere for emergency preparation and all. That's not what I bought into. I was a code guy, teaching code, supporting the manufacturers. I didn't want any part of that type of stuff, but it was a very comfortable job, and I would travel around the country handling issues for manufacturers. And then, of course, I made multiple trips out to Texas and formed a relationship with Encore Wire. And one day I'm out there, they kind of corner me and say, we'd like you to work for us and be ahead of our codes and standards. And, originally I said no, because NEMA paid very well, and I worked from home, and I traveled a lot. But ultimately, after about 6 months of continually pushing and flying out to handle some issues for them, because all manufacturers used us as a resource, the NEMA reps. So after doing this, I had a bad situation down in North Carolina with the code adoption that really ticked me off. And NEMA knew about it but sent me anyway. And it just was a total waste because we have a lot of stuff on our plate as a rep. Anyway, it really kind of pissed me off. And so by the time I got back and walked into the house, the phone rang, and it was the folks at Encore, and they got me at the right time. And you know what? I looked at my wife and I said, "Piss on it. Let's sell everything and just go to Texas." So that's kind of how I ended up in Texas. And of course, all that time, I still had my electrical contracting businesses with my brother and my own company, and I was teaching, and I just had so much. I was burning the candle at both ends. So anyway, that's how I made a decision. So that's kind of why I stopped. It was this kind of continual progression up the ladder to different levels of this industry. So that's the reason why I stopped. What didn't you like about it? What did I not like about inspections is the next question. Well, I should say I didn't like the office politics. I didn't like to hear other people's crap. I worked for a guy, and he's since passed away. His name was Pat Murphy. And at the end of the day, I hate to say this because he was passed away, but he was really a dick. And he went out of his way to really make it hard on contractors and the people that work there. I mean, just relished in other people's pain. And of course, I was so high up and appreciated by the mayor and the director that every time he'd do something, and he was my boss, he was the head guy he was not the building official, but he might as well have been. He would say up, I'd say down. He'd say left, I'd say right. I'd say he's wrong, and I'd call him out. And it just ticked him off that finally he got so flustered. It says, look, either Paul goes or I go. And they weren't going to let me go. And so I went and talked to the director, and the director had since the one that I originally came under that I knew had left. So the new director, I got along really great with her. But then the old director that left that originally got me there, I was talking to him offline, and he goes, you need to go up to Alexandria. And so that's when they contacted me and said, hey, we would love to have you up here and help us. So I just said, you know what, Pat, he's been there for 35 years. I'm not going to cause a problem with him. I don't get along with him. I don't agree with him. Funny that we'd eat lunch together, but I mean, it's kind of one of those things where I wouldn't turn my back on him because I'd be pulling a knife out of it. So I just agreed to just walk away. And so that was my biggest thing. The office politics are the worst. The good things about the working for a municipality is the benefits. Now, everywhere's different. But once you get past probation, they have, depending on where you're at, not everywhere, but for the city of Richmond, for example, you could commit hara-kiri and they would not get rid of you. One, they're always worried if it's a racial thing because they don't do anything. If it's racial, they get scared. They think it's always going to be the race thing. Two, unless you're stealing or doing something, you're going home and not doing inspections, they have what's called a grievance program. And they can't just get rid of you unless you're an at-will employee. And most inspectors, they are not. So they'd have to document their grief and would have to counsel you and put things in your file. I mean, it takes a while. So that's a benefit for job security. If they have a grievance program, they just can't. Plus, the municipalities don't want any black eyes, right? They don't want anything to make it in the news and all this kind of stuff. So I wasn't a big fan of that. But again, the benefit of it was they did have a grievance process. So once you got past your trial period, probation, then you were golden. Okay, so I did like that, and a lot of people I know, if it wasn't for that, they'd have probably been gone a long time ago. But there's a process, and that's one of the benefits. Now, retirement, obviously a benefit when you're working for yourself. You don't always have retirement, but municipalities usually have a pretty decent retirement plan, that type of thing. Sometimes they'll pay your health care benefits, not benefits, but your gym membership or something. I mean, there's different ones, different jurisdictions. My advice, though, is when you go in and negotiate, make sure you get what you want, because it's hard to get it after that, okay? And the people that came to me that would say, Johnny's making $58,000 and I'm making $48,000, and I'd say, okay, well, first of all, how do you know what Johnny's making? Because he told me. Okay, all right. Don't ever tell anybody what you make. It's none of their damn business. Secondly, you're responsible for what you negotiate, and only you. So if Johnny's getting 58 and you're getting 48, and y'all at the same level, then maybe Johnny's negotiating skills were just slightly better than yours. But again, if you accept a number, own that number. That's yours. You accepted it. Now, if you deserve raises and all that kind of stuff, that's different, okay? But I'm talking about entry numbers. Make sure when you accept it, you agree to it, that you understand it. Don't accept $48,000 only to find out that Johnny's getting 58, and you're like, son of a... Because you're all of a sudden now ticked off the municipality, and can you blame them? They're just trying to get out of you the best deal for them as well. And if you are willing to accept it, then you accept it. And work on how you get more money, doing a good job, performance reviews, getting more certifications might get you more money. If you're electrical and you want to do plumbing or mechanical, you get those certs, then you might get more money. You might get 5% increase in pay for doing other inspections on a job, doing things like that. I know some electrical inspectors in the city of Alexandria, Virginia, for example, are making $90,000, $100,000 because they have plumbing, mechanical, fire alarm, electrical, building. Okay, they do it all. And they can go to a job and do everything. Now, some people don't like combination, but they have learned that if they want to get more money, that's how they have to do it. Okay, so I would say that is, make sure you get what you want up front. Make sure you know all the stuff that you say yes to, because once you say yes to it, don't go spreading the rumors around in the garbage and saying, well, Billy sucks as an inspector. How the heck does he get 58 and I only get 48? And I work circles around him. Okay, maybe you do. But you're going to have to live up to it and own it, because maybe Billy just negotiated better than you. It is what it is. Don't blame Billy, and don't blame the municipality. Okay? Let's see. What else did he ask here? What type of person should become an inspector or not? I probably covered that. One that have a chip on their shoulder, probably not good in the inspection industry. Open-minded, non-confrontational, but if confrontational, somebody that actually can back up what they say. Listen a lot, those type of things. But I cannot stand inspectors who would reject things and not document why they turn something down. I just can't stand it. If you're an inspector out there and you're doing that, I don't understand why you would ever want to do that. If you can't cite a violation, how in the world can you fail somebody? And don't hide behind this thing where you say, well, they ought to know. Dude, you don't know. How do they know? You don't know. Well, it's not my job. Yes, it is. Okay, it's your job to do an inspection. If something is wrong, you need to cite what's wrong so that the electrician can fix it. Okay? They're an electrician, not a magician. They can't read your mind. Okay? So there's some inspectors who just don't have the attitude for it. Really, they don't. Trust me, you're going into this job, you're going to find a couple. You'll run into them. You don't be that one. What were some of the characteristics of the best inspectors you had under you? Well, I can tell you the best inspectors I had under me had the same drive and ambition and understanding of the National Electrical Code, really a desire to do the right thing, to not fail people for no reason. And most of the guys that really did a really good job, they didn't have to be so fluid in code, but they weren't afraid to pick up the phone and call me and say, Paul, is there a violation? I can't remember where it is. I can't seem to find it in the code. And before they're getting ready to say, I know what you're going to say, Paul, I can't fail him. But I just remember, well, they didn't have, I don't mind somebody reaching out and asking. Okay. What do they say about alcoholic? The first point of getting over it is admitting you have a problem. So at the end of the day, and I don't know that they ever get over it, but admitting you have a problem is the first step. If you can't find something in the code, reach out to somebody else, not the other other electrician. Reach out to other inspector. They don't know that maybe it's time for you to go to your supervisor and say, we need a training session. Because I'm a believer that you should probably do at least once a week an hour NEC training session for all the folks. And you should talk to your supervisor about it. In fact, why don't you volunteer to be that guy that holds it each week for the supervisor? And everybody can learn. That's a good way to stand out and do a good job. But yeah, I like honesty from an inspector. Don't lie to me. I used to tell this to my inspectors all the time. Look, I give you 100% of my trust. But once you deceive me, screw me, okay, stab me in the back, take away that trust, it is very hard for you to get it back. So you start out with a full slate. You have my trust, okay? Some people say you have your trust, but you earn their respect. Oh, no, you're here, you've got the job. I'm going to at least give you my trust, and I'm going to respect that you're going to follow my orders, and you're going to make sure that when you do an inspection that you give people code references and that you're an educator. You could say that's not your job, but under my guidance, it is your job to educate wherever possible. And as long as you do that right, then we're going to get along. We're going to have a good time. Everything's going to be okay. So my characteristics of a good inspector is one that understand that. And I liked all of my inspectors. You don't always have to have leaders because we need followers too. But I liked the inspectors that stepped up, and instead of having an excuse, they would have a solution rather than dwelling in the excuse. Okay, that's a characteristic that I liked a lot for an inspector. And you said any tips for your second interview? Just go in there very humble and say, I'm here to make the municipality better. Say I'm here to do good inspections and be a resource for the municipality. I know how to administer the code in accordance with the minimum safety standard, but I also know how to follow the guidelines of the department. And I'm here to learn, but I'm also here to teach, and I'm here to convey what I know. And I want to be a team player. All those type of things, if opportunities are presented, that's the kind of things that they're looking for. Okay. And the reason you might say that, well, what if I get one of those hothead interviewers? Well, you're typically not. These are going to be HR folk or a couple people from maybe a supervisor from inspections. Trust me, no supervisor wants a hothead. Nobody wants somebody that they're going to have to watch 24/7. They don't want it. They don't have the time nor the patience. But if you look like you can be a benefit to them, a resource to them, make their job easier, then those are the ones that have the best chance. Okay, so think about those different things at the interview stage, and hopefully some of that helps you out in some way. So anyway, there you go. That's all I've got for this episode. Hopefully you got something out of this. This is just for you. You know who you are. And hopefully you learned a little bit about my background, and it might help you a little bit in your journey as an electrical inspector, and hopefully become a great one and very successful and fair-handed and very code savvy, and realize that you can keep your baggage out of the office, keep it business in the office, carry yourself as such, because you only have one opportunity to make a good impression. It doesn't take long for that to deteriorate, and then the problem is they will remember that bad impression forever. Try to keep a good impression, okay? Come in, do your job, keep your mouth shut, don't quit back, don't start arguments, do your job, get out of there. That's it. And treat your personal life at home and have your friends at home. They're totally different than the office environment. And if you want to do something with any of them after hours, that's fine. It's not in an office environment. It's totally different to do things in an office environment than it is to get out of the office environment. Hopefully that helped you. Until next time, stay safe. God bless.